Hey everyone, welcome to Amanda's Book Corner. I'm Amanda, and this is my review of If You Ask Me by Libby Hubscher. This is her second novel, and I really enjoyed her first one, Meet Me in Paradise, when it came out last year. So I was really happy when Penguin reached out to me for a review of this book, and this book is out today, so this is one I definitely recommend you go to the store and pick up right away, because this is one you definitely want to read. If You Ask Me is about a woman named Violet. She works as an advice columnist, sort of like Dear Abby, but she's Dear Sweetie, and at the beginning of the novel, she finds out that her column is up for syndication. She's excited to share the great news with her husband, so she leaves work early to go tell him, but she finds him in bed with another woman. So this really sets the tone for where Violet is at when this book begins. She's in a sort of downward spiral as her marriage breaks down after finding out that her husband is cheating on her, and she's filled with rage and self-doubt and embarrassment, and she starts acting out in very interesting ways. For example, early on, she commits arson, and that's pretty fun to watch, even if it's not really legal for her to do that. She starts making some questionable choices, she starts drinking too much, but we also see that her column is starting to get some unexpected attention, and that's really affecting how things are going with her life as well. Meanwhile, there's also a new guy in her life, and they seem to be forming a sort of romantic relationship. Is it a rebound? Maybe. But she's also not entirely sure that she's capable of loving again, at least not yet. Like Libby Hubscher's previous book, this one is categorized as romance, but I think it's also more along the lines of contemporary fiction or women's fiction. It has a lot more drama and a lot more focus on, in this case, Violet and the personal issues that she's going through, whereas the romance that's in here, it's important, but I think it's a little bit secondary to the main story. By the way, I don't really like the label women's fiction, but that's a topic for another video. It just seems a little bit sexist. So her first book, Meet Me in Paradise, that one was a complete tearjerker. It was very heavy and had a lot of very difficult themes, and I could not stop crying through the end of it. In this one, and If You Ask Me, it also has some heavy themes. Some content warnings include themes of infertility, cheating, and alcoholism. But for me, it seemed like most of those were really at the beginning of the novel, and it wasn't quite as tearjerkery. I did still cry because I'm a sentimental person, but this is definitely one that's a little bit less heavy than her first book was. And although it does deal with a lot of heavy themes and might be a little bit of a tearjerker in certain parts, the way Libby Hubscher writes is also very fun and playful. For example, Violet is doing a lot of fun and silly things. She says a lot of funny comments. And so there's a lot of humor to this despite the heavier themes. And that really keeps it balanced throughout the whole book. It never feels completely too dramatic, but it never goes full comedy either. It's a little bit of both. I think first and foremost, I really like the themes of Violet finding herself throughout this book. She has a lot of insecurities and a lot of traumas that she has to work through. For example, it's not just that her husband Sam cheated on her, which is what we see at the beginning of the novel. As we work our way through, we start to get some insight into what was going on in her marriage before that, and how he was rather critical of her, how his mother was extremely critical of her and often insulted her, and he did nothing to defend Violet or stand up against his own mother. He just kind of let his mother walk all over her, which I think was horrible. We also learn about their infertility issues and the kind of strain that put on them and their goals for having a family. So there's a lot of heavier stuff that is in there, and a lot of things that I think Violet kind of ignored or brushed under the rug when she was with him. It seems that Violet thought she was happy, but I think she wasn't fully acknowledging the many ways that she was being mistreated or disrespected or just not cared for enough. After making a lot of mistakes and being clumsy and getting injured and committing arson and all the many things that Violet does in the first half of this book, we also see that she's starting to realize that she doesn't need to be a doormat anymore. She doesn't need to hide her own personal opinions and goals and sources of pride, and I think there's a lot of things in here that she has to unlearn on her path to discovering her self-worth and caring for herself better, sticking up for herself, and unpacking some of the traumas that are in her life. She's definitely a woman that could use some therapy, and it is mentioned throughout the book, although it's not until later on that she finally starts to get the professional help that she needs. But before she does get to therapy, it is at least good that she has a lot of support from her friends, from her mother, and from this new guy named Des. I really like the themes of friendship in this book. Violet has a best friend named Kyra, who is a really great source of support throughout this book, well, for most of the book. There's also her mother, and I really think that's a great relationship too, and we see how Violet inherited certain good and bad things from her mother, but also how her mother really does care for her and will defend her. And then there's a new guy, Des, the firefighter who she meets early on. He's a really wonderful hero in this book. He's a love interest, maybe a little bit of a rebound, but Violet isn't opening up entirely. But I really like that he's so reliable and he's always there for her. He's always trying to put a smile on her face and help her process her different emotions. I like that he says a lot of things that are not being said to Violet early on. He starts telling her, like, you don't need to hide your opinions. You don't need to hide your vulnerability. You can be your full self with me and I will always accept you and respect you and support you. And I think that's really wonderful. I do have to admit, he seemed a little bit too perfect at times, especially so early on after meeting her. I often wondered, like, how is this guy so present and so understanding and so kind and, I don't know, just so perfect. I'm not saying that's unrealistic, but I think for me it would have helped to get more perspective from him. We don't get any of his point of view, and so he can seem a little bit one-dimensional in this book. I think that's more because of the format, though. If this was a full-on romance, I think we might have seen his perspective in this book. But because this book is more focused on Violet and the kind of drama and turmoil that she's going through, there's not really enough room to add in Dez's point of view. I do think that would have helped him feel more complete, more well-rounded. He does say he has multitudes, and so we know that there's good and bad sides to him, but throughout this book, we mostly just see the good side. Dez being a little bit too perfect isn't a big problem, though. It's something that I can ignore and just accept, because the rest of the book is so good and has so much depth to it. Violet really is a mess throughout this book. Maybe not as much as Marin in Meet Me in Paradise, but Violet definitely has certain issues that she's working through. She's a little bit clumsy, she's accident prone, maybe a little bit of a drama magnet at this time. It's not her fault. I mean, she is going through a very traumatic experience, but sometimes it's a little bit over the top, but it still feels fun and relatable as she works through different issues and tells off her evil mother-in-law and tells off her evil neighbor. And again, it is a nice balance between the heavy and the light, between the funny parts and the things that are more emotional. And so there's a lot going on in this book, but it never feels like it goes too far in any one direction. One other aspect that I really liked about this book is the inclusion of some of Violet's Dear Sweetie articles. We get to see the questions and her answers to some of these different people that wrote into her. It really makes the book feel more complete, and it also gives you extra insight into Violet's psyche, the way she thinks, where she's at emotionally, and how that affects the advice that she gives to other people. Incidentally, I've only read one other book that includes an advice columnist theme, and that book is called The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. That one is a YA historical fiction, so a very different audience, but in that one, the advice columnist is also known as Sweetie, but in her case, it's Miss Sweetie instead of Dear Sweetie. So I thought that was interesting. If you want more advice columnist books, I could recommend that one. That one is for a different age group, and it has a historical setting, but incidentally, it's also set in the South. If you ask me, it's in North Carolina, and that one is in Georgia, so they're pretty close. One final thing I want to note is that if you read Meet Me in Paradise, you might remember that that was set on the island of Saba, and in this book, there was a little tiny nod to it. At one point, Violet and her husband Sam had gone on a vacation to Saba, and I thought, oh, that's a nice connection right there. Very subtle, but something that I definitely noticed. So in some ways, I think I liked If You Ask Me even more than Meet Me in Paradise. Again, it's not quite as heavy, so I did appreciate not crying quite as much this time, but I thought it was really well done. It offers a lot of really great lessons, and it was really great to see Violet grow as a person throughout this whole book. So I really enjoyed this one. I give it 4.5 stars. So I hope you enjoyed this book review video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And to make sure you don't miss any more of my videos, please ring the bell to get all my notifications. I put out about 2 to 3 book review videos like this one every week, as well as 1 to 2 other videos like vlogs and listicles. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!